later. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to welcome a good friend of mine up to the stage. He's going to let us know what he thinks of this new report that's come out about inequality in the United States. And actually, it says that the United States is technically an oligarchy. And I overheard an oligarch at a bar recently. He said, "What the fuck have I been paying all these senators for? It's an oligarchy in the first place." He seemed upset. But anyway, Brian Rad, everybody. Hi! Yeah!
I don't really know how this works. Oh, okay. In 3 hands. Thank you, Pat.
No problem.
For having me. Guys, I gotta be honest with you, this is not really gonna be funny or entertaining, but it will be short. Asked me to come here tonight. Yeah, short. Yeah, it's okay. I think I could speak for Mr. Whalen in saying that I think there's a real deficit in this country of privately educated, straight white men preaching at you in public about everything. I'm here to do that. Recently, a friend of mine asked me if we were to spread all the wealth in the world equally, divided by the population of the world, would the quality of your life be better or worse? And I really had no idea. There's no real data from the World Bank about how much wealth actually exists in this country, or in the world. It's the World Bank. So I thought that was interesting, and I thought, my life is so much better than a lot of people. Like, my life would probably get worse, right? Like, that's a shitty thing to think. Like, my quality of life would get worse if we just treated all the people like they were people. But I really had to think about it. So I did a little information. I'm not here to pretend that I'm an economic scholar or that I can even parse the data sheets of the new study that came out. This is more just like a Twitter rant. So I think we all heard the data that came out in March, that 0.00000001% of the world in regard to the other 50% of the world are equal. That is, each side there are 62 human beings on one side and 3.5 billion on the other, and they're both respectively worth $1.7 trillion. 62 people on Earth have as much wealth as the poorest half of the world. The first group averages about 20 billion per head in 2013 US dollars in individual wealth. The second, just $450, or a light lunch if you're in the first group. To put that in completely arbitrary, rage-bait perspective, Oxfam estimates that 2.5 billion human beings, people with names and eyes and all the other shit that you've got, including the physical limitation of being required to shit, 2.5 billion people do not have access to clean water. The metered water charge in the city of Chicago last year was $2.50 per 1,000 gallons of water. Of course, this is supported by hundreds of years of development and infrastructure, but this means that Charles and David Koch, the two brothers, tied at the 6th richest person in the world, and I use them as my example because I believe they are the first people whose doors should be broken down with our pitchforks if we ever stop watching the Kardashians, are worth a combined $80 billion, or 32 billion gallons of clean water, when more than a third of the world has none. I know this is abstract and completely unfair. It's an unfair metric to gauge wealth, but it's also important because it measures actual livelihood, means to sustain life. So, you know, I thought I'd throw that in there. This information, of course, is nothing new. I'm sure many people in this room tonight are employed in occupations that lead us to interact on a daily basis with individuals who have recently come to be known as the 1%. I'm not defending meritocracy or pluralism, but this division of 1% and the other 99, it doesn't work. We've become well adjusted to this notion that there are 1% of Americans who have all the wealth, but the reality is that the top 1% of wealthy Americans start at earning just $330,000. Now, that is a lot. 330, that's, you know, nothing to sneer at, but it's not outrageous. It's not out of line with what top earners, you know, executives and senior physicians and the rest of the Western world earn. It's not outrageous. 1 in 8 people will be 1%ers for at least a year in America in their lives. Which means that if there are 50 people here tonight, at least 6 of us will be percenters in that category for at least a year if we had not gotten bullshit theater degrees. Wait, as a side note, a theater degree from one of the 3 large BFA theater schools in town, over 4 years, including living expenses, averages 450 times the overall net worth of those 3.5 billion poorest people. Should feel shitty about that. Out of these 62 richest people on Earth, 40 are American. So there's this other super tiny fraction of America that isn't 1%. They're closer to the 0.02%. I think it's important to ignore this distinction between us and them, because it isn't us and them, it's really just us. They're such a small portion of our nation, they wouldn't register on a heat map. They're less than the margin of error in a municipal census. Nearly invisible, yet slowly, with distinctions. Their corporations are people, and Mexicans are not. And that wealth should be privatized and laws publicized so that they can buy elections, then senators, then federal judges, then laws, then wars, and eventually nations. The list of these 40 Americans could outspend the GDP of more than 60 countries registered in the World Bank highest 200 GDP list. So I'm not sure if I'm saying that we should vote better, whatever that means, or riot, or support Anonymous, or buy Bitcoin, or stop drinking out of Dixie cups, or the Koch brothers. All I'm trying to say is this idea of spreading wealth equally, just imagine that. Thank you.